All right, welcome to the PsyD Webinar. I'm Bradley Cipher, and I'm the PsyD Admissions Advisor for Divine Mercy University. And today I'm delighted to be joined by second-year doctoral student Dayspring Brock. For today's format, as usual, per usual for our webinar, I'll begin by interviewing Dayspring before launching into the PowerPoint slideshow where I'll highlight some of the most salient aspects of the PsyD program, and then we'll finish with Q&A. So should you have any questions, please lodge them in the chat box below, and we will field your questions at the end of the presentation. Also know that my email and as well as my Calendly link are available in the chat box. So should you want to get in touch with me afterwards, I'd be happy to do so. Please set up a time with me either by setting up a time in Calendly or sending me an email. Either way, I'm happy to meet with you. Okay, so welcome, Dayspring.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is an honor.
No, it's my pleasure. So Dayspring, let's begin with this. So tell me, how did you become interested in psychology in general and pursuing doctoral studies?
Sure. In reflecting on this question, I was thinking back about going back to my high school years. Don't worry, this story won't be too long. But I remember finding a quote that I remember writing kind of in a journal, and it's a quote by Frederick Buechner, who was a Protestant writer. And he said, "Vocation is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." And I remember just really reflecting on that, looking at where is it that I find my deep gladness and the world's deep hunger kind of intersecting, right? And it was very moving to me to think about that space, that sweet spot. And it sort of, I guess, began my my thinking about my major in college and career and all of that sort of thing, which after taking some circuitous routes, I ended up landing on teaching. I became an English teacher. And so I think that was sort of my answer to that question, was how I was going to try and meet that place of the world's hunger, was to find students in which to help them, intellectually find peace with who they are in the world. And so that's what I did. I was an English teacher for 18 years, and was pretty happy. It was very rewarding, as I'm sure many people have heard. However, I would say about maybe 5 years ago, I started listening to some podcasts, an evolutionary psychologist and a clinical psychologist talking about just approaching that question, all the questions and things that I was interested in helping my students sort through, but approaching it through the lens of psychology and through looking at the soul in a different way. And so I began to sort of explore possibly opening a new career, a second career. I'm a little bit unusual in the program in that I'm a bit of an older student, and this is a second career for me. However, I've felt like this has just been a perfect fit for me, because of perhaps maybe that preparation that I had always sort of been wrestling with in how to serve the world, in trying to answer that through literature, but now, kind of looking at it through the lens of psychology and through some of the best minds, more sciencey, but certainly, trying to answer some of the same questions. So
Yeah. It seems to me like it just seems very fitting in a way, right? Because I mean, if you think about what does great literature do? It kind of opens your mind into the soul of these characters, right? And a good author, these characters are teaching us, what it means to be human through, sometimes like flawed characters, and on the continuum, some are better than others, but like, it seems that through good books we get a sort of account of human nature, and and even though it's not, maybe not experimental, psychology in the scientific sense, but it certainly kind of gives you almost like a raw and kind of like um immediate sense of, humanity. Would you say that's fair?
I would, yeah. I'm reminded of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment,
Yeah.
where he, if you're not familiar with it, the story about a man who follows a kind of nihilistic way of thinking, philosophy, and then is able to just have zero zero qualms about
Yeah.
any kind of immoral act. And so I remember, teaching that book was just so it grabs people in such a way, because it's exploring through a character what many of us, I think, who are honest, are examining ourselves. But so literature is definitely a way in which, or I think good art is a way in which we can explore these ideas. But I think I was more interested after a certain amount of time of having a more applicable conversation with my students, which is kind of, you can't do that, as a teacher, as a classroom teacher. You're more interested in correcting papers and preparing them for college, etc. So therapy just seemed like a really wonderful way to transition my interests in helping people, you know, not through literature, but in a more one-to-one, intimate way of helping people through their issues.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, there's so much there. I mean, first of all, I mean, I'm so glad that you said Dostoevsky. I mean, I remember first reading that very book, Crime and Punishment. I think I was like a freshman in college or something, and it just is extremely impactful. Just that, like, the way that, he depicts, Raskolnikov's inner life, right? And his, just, I think the idea that being that it's like how ideas have consequences, and you can
yes.
see these ideas kind of play out in the flesh, as it were, because it's like, I think that's maybe the thing with, I mean, philosophy is wonderful, and studying ideas, but kind of like getting them into people and then watching them unfold.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, to like your other point about the applicable part, I mean that's, I think, also makes tons of sense, because it's like when you're a teacher, it's like you can talk about these fictional characters, you can talk about ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely wonderful. But then when you're a therapist, when you're a psychologist, when you're a clinician, you actually engage with it's they're not fictional anymore. They're real people, and they have real problems, and they're before you, and it's kind of like your privilege as a clinician to help guide them to flourishing and hope, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I also, going through COVID with my students and seeing
Mhm.
just the fallout, students were, I was teaching a 7th grade class, and I think it was that first year coming back from lockdown. I believe 5 of them entered into some kind of outpatient program by December.
Yeah,
There were real issues, and it seemed as if the problems were piling up, and there was a more urgency around that applicable, place
sure.
for yeah.
Yeah,
So
so it's almost sounds like you really answered a call, that you saw in your students.
I think so. Yeah, just trying to follow the breadcrumbs.
Sure,
And
sure.
yeah.
Great. All right. So, then tell me, why did you choose, of all the places, Divine Mercy?
Yeah, so I first heard about Divine Mercy through a friend of mine who did the MS in psychology program,
Mhm.
and just he raved about it and told me about the meta model, and especially just the integrative approach. I was very intrigued by it.
Mhm.
I also had a background in some theology and some reading JP2 and some of the the work around theology of the body. So I was interested in looking at psychology from a more Catholic lens, I guess.
Yeah.
And so when I first heard about it, I also reached out to two pretty renowned Catholic psychologists, and a third, one teaching in a Catholic university, that recommended hands down the program here at DMU. They said, if you want to get a solid Catholic perspective in psychology, this is the place to come. So it was that, with that information, that I decided to apply, and came last July, and have been really happy.
That's awesome. Did he I assume that he mentioned the meta model. Was there something about it? Did he explain the meta model at any length to you? Was there something that stood out as especially insightful in any of those conversations?
I don't remember specifically. I've learned a lot more about it since then,
Okay, gotcha.
in our own conversations, but I remember just the understanding that he was telling me about how it comes from a place of goodness. It comes from a place of thinking about the human as fundamentally good.
Yeah.
And then, the fall and the fallen nature is what has maligned us. And then the hope of redemption, right? Just those three building blocks. I remember that being a discussion, and just that filling a void, I think, in the field of psychology, because there has been, I guess, a lack of real positing of what it means to flourish and what it means to be redeemed. Besides probably the movement of positive psychology, there hasn't been a real boldness, I guess, in talking about what is the human person,
Right.
what has happened to us, and then
Yeah.
what we're made for, I guess.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Right. So like it sounds like,
yeah.
like an account of human nature seems to be kind of lacking. Or even when one is positive, it's like you get something along the lines of humanistic psychology, right? So like, self-actualization, like with Maslow or Rogers or something like that. Right. And yeah, so it sounds like, the meta model is offering an alternative to that, to kind of locate our finality beyond the self. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair. And because I think if you stay there, I was thinking about Freud's famous statement about how psychology is to help man pull out of his neurotic misery into common unhappiness. It's like, what a
Yeah.
goal,
Right,
right?
right. It's like the bar. I mean, it just seems like, it's not a super high
Pretty
standard
low.
in a certain sense, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of Jordan Peterson when he talks about, how we need to get back to normal incompetence. I just like it when I hear people quote that Freud line, I just think of Peterson, that part of Peterson. But the point being, namely, that it's like, what the vision of humanity that the church, holds out for us is, you might say, multi-layered, in the sense, like, just that you describe, fallen, redeemed in Christ, and the way in which, while you have, so like it's, good human nature, like, but still that it's fallen, and then we have this kind of rather exalted finality, friendship with God, both in this life, and then perfect happiness in the hereafter. um that's a rather more, multi-layered, and then also kind of like, yeah, higher calling than simply being like, how did Freud put it, like, just barely above the miserable.
Common unhappiness.
Yeah,
Getting
it's
under translation.
right. Imagine that as put that in your, when you become a psychologist, put that in your brochure. It's like, come to Dr. Dayspring Brock, and you can have, like, just barely above the threshold of misery.
Yeah.
Anyway, I I'm Here, okay, how about this? So far, I know that you're sort of still early on in the program, but what would you say would be your major clinical and academic interests?
Yeah. Um, Great question. I'm still sort of in the process of defining the work that I'll be doing on my dissertation. But I have joined a team that is looking at doing some empirical research as well as theoretical to help design a high school curriculum that would be based on the meta model to try and shore up some of this void that we have found to be missing, I guess, in Catholic schools specifically, where maybe we have like a heavy theology department, but our students are kind of missing what it means to live that out. And then also experiencing mental health issues, right? So right now we're in the process of just doing some measures and looking at where students are with looking at spirituality, their religious formation, but also stress levels and loneliness,
Hmm.
and some of the areas in which we find this post-COVID generation really struggling. So I've joined a team that is going to be looking at that, and then hopefully working on some kind of curriculum that can help with using what we've developed here at Divine Mercy to help make something for high school students. So it's pretty
Hmm.
exciting. I guess I'm still kind of working out sort of the specifics, but that's sort of the broad scope.
So is this team comprised mostly of DMU students, or is this
Correct.
okay, gotcha.
Right. Faculty and students.
That's really neat. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So Dayspring, thus far, what have been, to your mind, what are the most, maybe on the one hand, enjoyable and rewarding parts of being in the program, and then maybe some of the most challenging or difficult?
Yeah. So I mean, rewarding, the most wonderful parts of being here at this university are probably the professors, the relationship
Mm,
that we have with several of the professors. We There has been such an effort to help especially our cohort to engage and to connect and to ask questions and to share where we are struggling. And it's just been an environment or a culture that is encouraging and is interested in us as people and not just as um, numbers or
mm,
just trying to create a program, but they're really interested in us as people. And it's been just phenomenal as far as the relationships with the professors and then with our cohort, um, and just the encouragement that they have um, given us to join organizations and join memberships that will make us very competitive in the
mm,
workplace, but also very committed to who we are as faith-based persons, if that's indeed what we are. So it's just been a really good foundation. It hasn't been heavy-handed in any way. Um it's just been a very encouraging culture.
mm, mhm.
And I would say, I guess the challenge, um there's just, I mean, just academically, it's tough
Sure.
as it should be, right?
Yeah, right, right.
It's a time management issue, and going back to being a student again has all of those challenges, but definitely manageable, definitely uh good, challenging in the right ways.
Okay. Yeah, that's very, very fair.
Mhm.
All right. So for those listening, what might be some very good reasons for doing the doctorate, the PsyD with us, and what might be some not so good reasons for doing it?
Yeah. um some good reasons would be if you're interested in looking at how spirituality and psychology intersect, looking at um, uh, for example, attachment theory. There's been a lot of work done here on attachment to God and how it reflects in our attachment in our relationships. Um, Virtue theory, how courage, for example, might be um, a virtue in which we could help use as an intervention in working with patients. So I would say if that is something that is of interest to you, if you like me have had you know this question of where the world's suffering and how God and how the church can help meet those goals, that this is definitely a good place for that. And I want to give a caveat. It's not as if spirituality is necessarily it can't solve a psychological problem necessarily. Just like psychology can't solve a spiritual problem. There is a difference there, but it actually informs, right? Our mental health is informing our spirituality, and our spirituality is informing our mental health. And there's a lot more to say about that, but those are the kinds of discussions that we have here at the school. And if that's something that is of interest, I think this is definitely a place, and it's solidly competitive as well, as far as the scholarship here. And it's been very, very good.
Okay, what might be some really not so good reasons for doing the program?
Yeah. I would say the people that have maybe struggled the most are people who may have kind of their heart in a good place, but may not fully understand the vision of the university, and could maybe benefit by a good program at George Mason University, or finding an area of research at a major tier university somewhere else. This is definitely a research research school, but it's not primarily something that is the research is not divorced from the alliance with helping the clients in a therapeutic way. So I guess that's my first thought, that I would say, if that's something that's troubling, then it probably isn't the best place.
Yeah, that's great, because I mean, I think that kind of is a firsthand account of what I often try to relate to people that are interested in the program, namely that it's like interest in and commitment to the mission of DMU is extremely important, right? Because it's like if you're interested in sort of, you might say, like a purely secular version of psychology, and or you merely want to be a researcher, and then like there's that's completely legitimate. I mean, we need good psychological researchers. It's maybe there are other options, but also like you say, it's kind of like it's a balancing act in a way, because it's like as we also do research here as well, right? I mean, part of the program is you're doing a dissertation, and so one seems to me have some intrigue and some desire to delve deeply into some area of psychology, and hopefully some way in which that's related either to clinical practice or the meta model and the way that we see the human person. Would you agree?
Yes. Oh, I would agree. Yeah. And it probably comes about in the difference between a psychologist and a counselor, right? Like if you want to be purely therapeutic, then go the counseling route. But if you want to have some authority in what you say and what you propose to your clients as well as to the broader community, then being a psychologist is the way to go.
Yeah, you anticipated my very next question, which is the distinction between counseling in psychology, right? I mean, like the one that just wants to do talk therapy isn't necessarily interested in like research. Testing, clearly is like a huge part of the PsyD curriculum, being able to, carry out the entire range of psychological assessment from intelligence, cognitive to personality and others. And also, like you said, I think the mention of authority is very important, and it's a salient thing because, yeah, I mean, having PsyD after your name, is simply just a matter of fact that it's just a much more helpful way to communicate your ability to speak authoritatively on certain issues, which is, for a lot of people, it's exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what would you say would be, you've already touched on a couple things here, but maybe you could either expand on them or talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
I was thinking 2 to 3 of the most formative ideas that you've learned at DMU that have been especially impactful for you.
Okay. Yeah, before I talk about that, can I just add a note on the difference between psychologists
Of
and
course,
counselors? Because
please.
this was definitely a question that I had. So if anybody is out there struggling between those two um, uh, vocations, both do very similar things, but I've I've been convinced to go the PsyD route primarily because of the quality of life that a psychologist will have as opposed to a counselor. Um, and I think this really appealed to me, just especially coming into my second career. I don't I didn't the the idea of seeing patients back to back, um, 30 hours a week or what have you. Um, you probably set your own hours, but just to keep a picture of that's like 5 or 6 patients a day, right? So
Mhm.
imagine holding all of those people's stories in your mind on a weekly basis, and that's kind of the life of the counselor. Whereas a psychologist has a little more flexibility. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to is not only having a practice, but being able to have perhaps a little business on the side to do assessments, like you were just saying, Bradley, about the cognitive and personality assessments. The possibility of working in forensics, reporting in court, working as a school psychologist. That's something that is would be really, really neat, as well as even working in psych wards, hospitals, VAs, community centers, things like that. That some of these places only will hire PsyDs or PhDs. So just keeping that in mind, as far as like lifestyle, quality of life, what you want your life to look like post graduation is something that could maybe help with decision making. It helped
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, good. Do you have any desire to teach psychology?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think I've been told that it's probably better to have a PhD if you're working in the universities. However, I've noticed that it's very interchangeable. Some of my professors are PsyDs, some of them are PhDs, just depending on what is being taught. Obviously, I don't think I'd ever be qualified science or pharmacology or anything like that. But teaching, basic interviewing and these kinds of Psych 101, that those kinds of things would be really, really fun, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually something that also comes with the territory of a doctorate.
Yeah, yeah, good. I mean, I like how you kind of spelled that out in terms of the fields within psychology, because it's not often, so like for instance, for example, like forensics, educational psychology, the VA, right? These kinds of things that to kind of get beyond a private practice setting or a setting in which that's sort of more general and talk therapy based. very often will require, a doctorate for people
Yeah.
to get hired. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
Good. Now, I want to revisit this business of, the
Sure.
major ideas. So
Mhm.
you mentioned attachment and virtue theories. Can you either speak more to that, or are there other things that you've learned that have been really kind of like hit you as like, wow, like this is a really remarkable idea that you've learned here?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of touched on some of the things. Uh, one thing that just stands out is how important it is to understand how this is a vocation.
Mm,
I'm reminded of Edith Stein's um, discussion about the professional life. She was proposing that we offer a, a vocation of the professional life, not just religious or married. And as a single woman, that speaks to me because, um, you know, this is a kind of parenthood, right?
mm,
Taking on patients, and I suppose it'd be the same in many other vocations as well. But if if you're not somewhat interested in speaking into people's lives and being a kind of reservoir or um, caretaker of other people, then this is not probably the work for you because it requires um, a lot of ability to walk in people's shoes, and sometimes that means to enter into their darkness.
yeah.
And I've just started taking patients this summer, and I'm starting to discover that in a deeper way. And I would say, and our professors from the beginning have offered for us to get into therapy because this is just the kind of work that we're doing. We really need to be capable of being able to explore and understand and know our own fallenness and our own capabilities of you know there by the grace of God go I, that
Right.
we are vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's really a place of you really have to be willing to take a look at yourself, and that's one area that I was a little bit surprised by, um, but has been really good for me, um, taking it seriously as a vocation, and it makes sense, right? Like we're looking at the whole person, so it makes sense to be vulnerable in your whole person as you do this work. So I would say that's one thing. As far as um, I think also just learning more and more about how integration works, which is kind of a buzzword
Yeah.
around here, and it can remain on as a buzzword, but it has actually a real deep reality, um, because everyone is a spiritual being, and we're body and soul, both of those things. And so if we're trying to do this work without ever acknowledging the spirit and the, I guess you might call, the createdness of human beings, if people are just their own gods, right? Then yeah, you can give them some meditation techniques and self-actualization and send them on their way, right?
Right.
But
Right.
what we're here uh, in, not necessarily resolving um, uh, completely, in other words, it's not as if we have all the answers,
Mm,
um, but in acknowledging um, that part of a human person, which is deeply integrative in a both spiritual and physical way, um, and then holding out for them the what a human person looks like and what a
mm,
human person that's flourishing looks like, holding that out for them and saying, this is the way.
yeah.
I think we to develop in that way, and to develop um, in a culture here at DMU where we're not pretending to know a formula for that, but to have that conversation. All good things, I think, in my opinion, are very difficult to articulate, and that's an example of something that's it's hard to articulate because it's so very good, and it is so complex.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the human person, for crying out loud, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is like it's just not a simple reality. It's not like, studying rocks or something. I mean, with all due respect to geologists, whoever geologists are out there. I mean, but yeah, look, you hit on so many great things, right? I mean, like the sense of vocation, this is like, it is a career, but it's also something more than that, it seems, right? Because I mean, for the reasons that you mentioned, namely that like it sounds like, again, there are parallels with your career in teaching, right? I mean, that you were a teacher, there's a massive amount of parenting that goes on with that. You are there for your students in the same in a different way, though. You're going to be there for your clients, your patients. You know one of the things that I remember Dr. Vitz would say, that the telos, or the end of therapy, is to inspire hope, right, in your clients and your patients. And that even, yeah, I mean, even if you don't have the answers to people's sometimes just mysterious and difficult and knotty life conundry,
Right.
it's like you are an instrument of healing and of compassion, right? And that that virtue of compassion and being able to literally to suffer with other people seems like indispensable, really, for the person that's going to take on the vocation of a psychologist, or any clinician, for that matter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Okay. We've already kind of hit on this here and there. So, but I wanted to ask this. So like you say, a watchword around here is integration. And we talk much about the meta model, as a way of thinking about our humanity, and how to flourish as an alternative from you might say, an approach to looks at man as, or as an approach that's overly pathological, that it's okay, well, we have this is wrong with you, we have ADHD, and we have addiction, and we have psychosis and bipolar, right? But that we have a positive view of humanity. What concrete difference might that make within a therapeutic setting for a clinician?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I'm reminded of is we had a discussion, an hour-long discussion in my cognitive behavior class about why diagnose, right? And there's different schools of thought on diagnosis, right? One being that to diagnose someone is to label them, stigmatize them, put them in a box, codify them. The DSM, all the critiques of the DSM, come to mind. And on the other hand, the other school of thought is to say, well, if you don't diagnose, then you're kind of in this murky gray area of never really being able to find a reason for their pathology, and then of course finding the right treatment, or finding the right goals for them. You're just kind of swimming in this gray murk. And I remember just kind of working through that as a class. And then one of the things that Dr. Oriana was able to point us to is the importance of telling the truth. And I thought this was such a salient point, because and that being a guiding light for all of our decisions, right, is telling the truth, and how important it is to do that in such a way that balances compassion, like you were saying, Bradley, and so that you're not just stabbing people with the truth and writing it writ large on a big sign, what diagnosis they are, but you do it in a sensitive, ethical way, so that someone is able to contend with what may be a real reality in their life that may actually guide them. So I guess we kind of fell out on the pro diagnosis side, but I thought that was such a good example of what we do here at DMU, which is to not necessarily give us talking points, but to really take something seriously, flesh it out, integrate our moral compass, which is to tell the truth, with a very real psychological dilemma in the area of diagnosis. So I don't know if that kind of gets at what you're saying, but maybe is just an example of how integration might work. But there, I can think of other examples as well. Just
so help me understand that. I want to understand this business of the truth, right? Like, was she saying that in defense of diagnosing as a way of like communicating truth to people, in the sense that truth can only liberate, right? But obviously like doing it in a tactful way. Was that the idea that
yeah.
was like supporting the diagnosis?
Yes, correct. Right. Yeah. And it so that it like you said, just that the truth will set them free, in a sense,
Yeah.
that there's a freedom to sometimes needing to speak the truth in a very painful place, such as a pathology. I'm thinking of, personality disorder or something. But how important it is for our role as a psychologist to present that information in a compassionate and loving way, but not to excuse the truth in that situation.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
I'm reminded of like discussions of shame surrounding like whatever pathology that may be, right? Because it's like I think that the way people perceive their own pathologies, neurosis, what are you going to call it? It's like some might experience like the shame of the stigma of being labeled like whatever that may be, like OCD, what have you. But then like there also seems to be like the possibility of shame in the sense that like you have this condition like you were saying, the murkiness, the mystery, the uncertainty of what it is operative, and also like where it comes from, and then how do you escape that, right? And then there's sort of like a fear of disgrace that surrounds that as well. So it seems like the question of shame, depending on the person, could cut both ways. Was that at all part of your discussion?
Yeah. Not necessarily shame, but I can definitely see how that completely fits in to this kind of approach, how important it is to give people, I guess again, just the word reality keeps coming to mind, like helping people to live in reality, right? Which is so much about what this profession is trying to do. And sometimes that means calling out something very painful, but doing so that you can get to something that might be good for treatment or finding a solution to it. But it's almost like naming it is sometimes that first step.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think like to kind of draw the analogy with medicine, right? I mean, it seems to me that there's less of a sort of like a question. It's like, well, it's like this person has cancer, they had tuberculosis or whatever. But that psychology is so, it's like it's not just like to think of it in a platonic sense, like, okay, well, like, yeah, I have a body, but like the deeper part of me is really my soul. But that's exactly what the psychologist is engaged with. And so to speak of, different pathologies, it's like it strikes closer to home for a lot of people. And maybe that's why, hence the difficulty, and kind of, speaking the truth about something that's even more deeply rooted in our humanity.
Oh, that's such a great distinction. I'm imagining like if when you get cut, a doctor can first clean out the cut and then, apply the medicine and stitch it up, right? And we don't have any, it doesn't reach into our very person, right? When we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
such a surgery. But with this profession, it's doing a different kind of surgery. And sometimes the metaphor applies here as well. You have to open up the wound, allow it to, and clean it out before you just stitch it back up, which that means that you need to have the right medicine. That means that you need to really name and call out what is bothering that personality. So I think that the analogy holds, but you're right, it's so personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
It's the difficulty, but the glory of of being a clinical psychologist is that's kind of you're engaged with what is some of the most difficult and highest parts of being a human person. So
Yeah, for sure.
good. All right. So your I know that you're kind of still early on here again, but one last thing. You talked to a little bit about your background with teaching, and then your dissertation idea with your group, your research group, and what have you. Where might you hope to be placed in your 5th year to do an internship?
Oh yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question. I was hoping you wouldn't. I am just
Totally speculative. There's no right or wrong answer.
That's right. No, the more I'm looking into adolescence with my dissertation, the more I'm wondering if I'll probably be called back into schools, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to get away from schools, but here I am.
It's like a tractor beam just drawing you back into where you
Right,
belong.
kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
No, I love that age group, that population, and particularly, I think what's been interesting to me is looking at all that's been going on with adolescence and social media and identity issues, specifically gender identity. There's something there that I feel drawn to, and I'm not really quite sure what that's going to look like as far as what that means for externships, internships. I'm not sure yet. I suppose I'll try my best to do to find something that can really give me a good general practice, so that I can work with all populations. But I would think that maybe eventually, working with adolescents would be something I would find really, really beneficial. So
Yeah. What makes you
we'll
so
see.
interested in that group?
Oh, wow. It's a great question. I think I taught sophomores, which is the worst year of high school. I just want to point that out, for many reasons. I taught sophomores probably the most in my teaching career, but I found them to be so just at the cusp of really becoming human in so many ways. Like I noticed a really interesting difference between the boys and the girls in that population. And it's just such a time of developing self-consciousness and learning what it means to be an adult. And I just find that time just so fascinating. And then also just how they're beginning to crystallize their identity, and they're trying out different identities, which is very normal. But I think what we're seeing today is people are trying to crystallize that too soon, and try to codify that identity early on before they're able to really go through maturation. And what does our brain fully mature, and not until we're 25 or 26 or something. So there's room to grow. And so just I think it's just that interesting balancing act between helping teens learn to have some freedom, right, but not too much freedom, where they feel like they have no no footing, no grounding. So just learning to balance that, I find to be really fascinating.
That's so cool. I love how you said, like they're on the cusp of humanity, right? And it's almost like the temptation to kind of like grow up prematurely, to kind of like be a
Yeah.
child for just a little bit longer while it's fitting to still be a child.
Yes, right.
All right, Dayspring, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's jump into the presentation. So this is the overview of our doctoral program. So Dayspring, I'll be calling on you from time to time to comments, because you're kind of in medias res with it. So let's get into it. Divine Mercy, as we've been saying, is a Catholic graduate school of psychology, started in 1999, is founded as the Institute of the Psychological Sciences, dedicated to the scientific study of psychology with a Catholic Christian understanding of the person, marriage, and family. The expansion from IPS to DMU occurred in 2016 to facilitate growth and add a counseling program at the graduate level. So we're one university, DMU. We do have two distinct schools. School of Counseling, which we've adverted to in a few times in our discussion, is an online program at the master's level and trains people to be clinicians, master's level clinicians as counselors. And also the Institute of the Psychological Sciences, is the doctoral program, which we're talking about today. It's a residential one on campus here in Sterling, Virginia. We also offer a Master of Science in Psychology, which is exclusively online. Okay, our mission is to provide students with an effective academic and educational environment that supports the integration of the psychological sciences and a Catholic Christian understanding of the person through teaching and learning both knowledge and critical skills. Also assisting students intellectually and professionally as they prepare themselves to respond to their vocation as mental health professionals. Okay, so we are outside of Washington, D.C., or about an hour west of the big city. This is, to my mind, is just a really wonderful area to live and work, study. We have access to the big city, if that's your swing, if that's your jam, if you like more country stuff, if you like outdoors and hiking, canoeing, camping, what have you, that's also very much on offer to the west. Okay, as you can see, we have a series of accreditations. We're institutionally accredited by SACS, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. SACS is recognized as an accreditation agency by the Department of Education. Divine Mercy has voluntarily participated in the accreditation process, meeting or exceeding all standards and thorough evaluation. We're also approved to operate by SHEV, the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia. And the study program has been recognized since 2006 as a national research designation program by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. And maybe most notably of all is that we are APA accredited. That is by the American Psychological Association since 2016. And we've been approved to participate in the National Council for State Authorization or Reciprocity Agreements. So we have basically every conceivable accreditation. Okay, so while it's true that there are a number of different types of clinicians, be it counselor, social worker, clinical psychologists, or even psychiatrists in some cases, really, as we have mentioned, the major distinguishing among others, but the major distinguishing factor is the ability to assess, to conduct the full battery of psychological assessments to help more precisely diagnose and treat patients. It is a 5-year program, this ID, 122 credit hours all told, with a Master of Psychology in passing. So Dayspring will have her Master of Psychology after the end of this year, provided all goes well. There's now, mind you, there's no thesis or comprehensive exam requisite for the MSci. Is that right, Dayspring?
There are comprehensive exams. Actually, I think that's 3rd year. So no, that's correct. It's just coursework.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And then, so, the way this curriculum is set up, not unlike if you had gone to go to medical school, the heavy course load is mostly in the 1st and 2nd years. It does thin out thereafter, so that you're going to spend more time with your clients in 3rd and 4th year. And looks like, I think, for example, on average, what is it, 1 or 2 clients in year 2?
Yeah, I think you can reach up to about 3 or 4 by the end of the year, but they definitely phase you in so that you're not doing it all at once.
Sure, sure. And then, I mean, in years 3 and 4, what is that, like 7 to 9-ish clients, something like that?
Correct. Yeah. Could be up to 8 or 9.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And then in the 5th year is the internship. Okay, this is, not unlike going to, residency for medical school. You apply to it in your 4th year, you get matched into a residency. And this is depending heavily on your particular clinical or academic interests. So whether it's you're interested in addiction or psychosis or bipolar or autism or whatever it may be, there's chances are there's an internship out there for you. We do, some of our students, I should say, have gone to local sites. So St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., the Virginia Medical Center, the Psychiatric Hospital of D.C. These are in our area. So surely if you wanted to stay local in your 5th year, you could absolutely do so. But you're also not tethered to this place either. You could go off to wherever you get in. So dating back to 2017-18, we had 85% of our students get into APA accredited sites. At this point, we're at 100% match rate. We were delighted to announce that this past year where we got 100% placement. The year before that, we had 100%. I think the year before that, we had like 98. So the chance of you getting into a high caliber APA accredited site is extraordinarily high coming from our program, that is. Okay, so like I was saying, this is kind of a bird's eye view of the curriculum. Lots of courses in year 1 and 2. Notice that it's also a full year long program, so you're going to be busy, and not just in the fall and spring, but you'll also be active in the summer. There's coursework going on in the early part of the summer, and then more clinical things in the latter half. So for example, Dayspring was recently got oriented in the clinic toward the end of this past summer, and now she has her first foray into clinical work this year. As you also might see, this is largely pre-prescribed. That we are APA accredited means that a lot of this is sort of a coursework that just simply must be done. There is a little bit of elective credit toward the end of the program in years 3 and 4. Here you can see one in the spring of year 3 and then the spring of year 4. You do take your comprehensive exams typically in the summer of year 3, well, between years 3 and 4, and then you're dissertating thereafter, right? So, you pass your comps, and then it's, trying to get your dissertation finished, hopefully, God willing, by the end of the 5th year. And, look, to also as a side note, we do have people that take longer, and they go into this quote unquote 6th year, but that's okay if that happens to be you. Okay, questions of discernment. Do you want to help people flourish? Are you interested in the science behind human behavior? Do you want to become an instrument of healing through the psychological sciences? Are you interested in performing psychological tests and assessments to diagnose your clients and create treatment plans? Are you looking to start a career as a licensed mental health professional, but specifically as a clinical psychologist? And do you have the ability and desire to work with all types of clients, from more acute care to more challenging and long-term client cases? So if you're hearing these and you're thinking yes, yes, yes to all of them, then you come to the right place. Okay, major areas of competency that we do aim to inculcate in all of our students over their course of study: foundations in psych science and research, integrity in practice, assessment and diagnosis, therapeutic intervention, professional roles, and really our hallmark, namely clinical practice from a Catholic and integrative perspective. I'll go through each of these in more detail. So first, foundations in psych science and research. Graduates will attain foundational psychological science knowledge of biological, cognitive, social, and developmental aspects of the human person, as well as history and systems of psychology, psychological measurement, research design, and statistical method. Graduates will have the skills necessary to conduct their own psychological research. 2, integrity in practice. Graduates will be knowledgeable in areas of diversity and ethics, and display critical thinking, self-aware reflective practice, and self-care. Graduates will demonstrate responsiveness and supervision, collegiality, and professional comportment in professional practice. Okay, 3, assessment and diagnosis. Graduates be able to conduct clinical interviewing, perform intake evaluation, demonstrate knowledge in the administration, scoring, and interpretation of psychological assessments, integrate multiple sources of test data and clinical interview information into written reports, diagnose, and develop a treatment plan. 4, therapeutic intervention. Graduates be able to demonstrate case conceptualization, treatment planning, building and maintaining a therapeutic relationship, psychotherapy skills, crisis management of urgent and special circumstances, and discharge planning. 5, professional roles. Graduates be able to function in a variety of required roles of professional psychologists to include consultant, educator, supervisor, practice manager, and program evaluator. They'll be able to work collaboratively within ISMAR teams and clients. And then finally, clinical practice from a Catholic and integrative perspective. Graduates will develop a Catholic understanding of human flourishing in an individual person, marriage, and family life, and be able to integrate this with the psychological sciences and clinical practice. So the field of clinical psychology is extremely diverse. There's lots of different areas in which you become expert within. But the main task of the program and of our own curriculum is getting you licensed. So at the end of the, well, you get the doctorate at the end of the 5th year, and then we'll talk about licensure in a subsequent slide. But as Dayspring mentioned, there are several different areas that are available only to doctoral level clinicians. These are a few, with the exception of working in private practice, because if you are a counselor, you should surely do that. But besides that, psychiatric hospitals, military establishments, outpatient clinics, certain outpatient clinics, diocesan consultation, and then clinical facility. This one I want to highlight, for example, being a diocesan consultant. I think it's really neat, especially if you're a Catholic and you want to help with, say, testing for seminarians to be, to determine people's fittingness for ministry. Things like this certainly require the testing skills that only clinical psychologists have. Okay, we've had really legions of students come through our school and enjoy a great deal of success here and flourish in the world thereafter. James Baldich has said, in our clinical psychology program, the training is focused on healing the whole person. Kristen Long, I was drawn to the PsyD program out of a desire to serve others in a more profound way than my previous positions offered. Timothy White, the school is not afraid to teach you what it means to be human at every level, psychologically, philosophically, and theologically. That's why I like it. And then Kirsten Curtis, I'm so thankful for DMU. The faculty members are very supportive, and I've received lots of hands-on and clinical experience. Okay, this is a video testimonial from one of our recently graduated alumni.
I would say that being a student at Divine Mercy University, or DMU, is one of the best things that happens to me. I really appreciate a great support from faculty members and also classmates. I have gained a great deal of knowledge in all aspects of clinical practice, research, and also professional development. DMU not only provides students with strong academic skills, but also prepares them for a career in psychology. I personally benefit from mentorship with academic advisor and clinical supervisors. As a person, what I most appreciate from DMU is that its mission helped broaden my perspectives in understanding a human person through the lens of Catholicism. Catholic principles, especially in hope, love, and faith, are very valuable and certainly helped me become a better clinician.
So we offer a generalist program in psychology here at Divine Mercy, meaning we have faculty with expertise across the curriculum of psychology, and that's both at a theoretical level and the practical level as well. These are a few of many professors. So Dr. Klowicki is our dean. She's a specialist in assessment and therapy. Dr. Graves is a specialist in child and developmental psychology, and Dr. Ariana is our director of clinical training. These 3 gentlemen here at the bottom are among the founding faculty members of our school, dating back to the late 90s. Dr. Strafani is a specialist in CBT and group therapy. Dr. Nordling is a specialist in marriage, family, and child therapy. And Dr. Abitz's work is largely focused at the intersection, the nexus between theology and psychology. Okay, now, in terms of licensure, much like if you were to go to law school or medical school, getting the terminal degree, the professional degree, doesn't immediately confer licensure. So this is something to which you will have to obtain after graduation. So we do help you, get data and information about licensure, but ultimately it is each student's responsibility to make sure that they get the information that they need. So after you graduate is typically from the PsyD program. That is, it's typically a 9 to 12 month period of where you'll be supervised by a licensed clinical psychologist. And thereafter, you take your board exams, which typically happen both at national and state level, and then you are PsyD LCP, licensed clinical psychologist. Now, in terms of this investment, I like to contrast it with something like buying something entirely material, like a car, where you buy the car and the value of that is going to rapidly kind of diminish in the years subsequent to its purchase. Whereas when you purchase, when you invest in yourself, in your education, especially one where there's so much demand for this work, and there's so many people hurting out there with they're struggling with loneliness, anxiety, addictions, depressions, all kinds of issues. That's really kind of we're beset by these things within our modern world, and we simply need people to answer the call to be healers in faith and science. And so what all that to say is that because there's such a demand for it, this is going to be something where not only is it personally fulfilling in all the ways that Dayspring had mentioned, but also it's one where you can do very well financially for yourself, and especially if you find yourself in the right kind of niche within psychology, as some can be quite lucrative. Now, the investment itself is $1,170 per credit for 122 credits. Over 5 years, it's $142,740. That does not include fees or indirect expenses such as housing, gas, what have you. Now, in addition to this, I would say that many of our students do get federal aid, grants from the government. The FAFSA form does become available in December. So if you're hoping to get into our November interview, you need not worry about the FAFSA until December, but it is something that, should you need federal aid, will have to be complete. But once you complete your application online, our financial aid office will get in touch with you to help work with you through this process. We do offer student assistantships, work study programs for doctoral students here on campus to help defray costs. And also, if you're a Catholic student that can show evidence that you are a member of good standing at a parish, there's also a discount associated with that, usually between 10 and 15%. We also, as you can see, offer a slew of different scholarships to which you would be eligible to apply. I certainly encourage you to take a look at each of them at our website, divinemercy.edu/financial aid. They pay up to the amount indicated here to the right. And we also offer merit-based scholarships. Now, merit-based scholarships are not ones that you apply to specifically in the way that you would these others. They're the way this works is the faculty rank the applicants in each of our interviews, and then they pick maybe the top like 6 or 7 for these merit-based scholarships based on a number of criteria that includes, but is certainly not limited to, things like grades and GRE and things like that. Okay, we really do look at the whole person. This is obviously, as may be evident, we're in a PsyD program where we're training psychologists to be. It's very important that people not just look good on paper, but that they're actually they come across as capable people, and ones that would be fitting clinical psychologists. In terms of entrance requirements, we do require a baccalaureate degree from a regionally accredited school. While we do prefer that people study psychology, that's by no means required. People come to us with all types of backgrounds. As Dayspring mentioned, she was an English teacher. She also, I believe, has a master's in humanities. Is that right, Dayspring?
Yes.
Yeah. And also, we do ask that your GPA be at least a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale. If you're not quite there, let's say that your GPA is something like a high, maybe like a 2.8, 2.9, some of that, talk to me. It might not be necessarily prohibitive. but let's have that conversation before you rule yourself out prematurely. Now, practical things like applying. So if it sounds like this is making sense to you, and you want to apply, the thing to do is to do so first online. It's a rather easy application. It's a lot of data entry regarding your name and where you live and where you went to school and who might recommend you, things like this. And of course, once you submit it, the financial aid office will get in touch with you, and then thereafter we maintain communication until all the other subsequent elements of the application are received, and I'll speak more to that here in a second. And then once they are all received, they're collated and then reviewed by the dean, Dr. Plukey, and then hopefully you'll get into an interview. We do have 3 interviews per year. The first coming up, in fact, November 10th. This, you might say, is probably our most popular interview of all, and for a couple of reasons. The first is that you figure out whether you got in quickly. That's nice to know, but also we offer a $3,000 tuition remission the first year. So there's that. We also tend to dole out probably most of the merit scholarships at this interview. So for those reasons, it tends to be very popular, and we've already received many applications for this one, and to be totally forthcoming, and many of the slots have been already taken and they continue to be taken. So please, if you're serious about this as something that you want, and you want to be considered for this early scholarship, please get in touch with me and I can help you streamline the process and move forward. Okay, so like I said, the first thing to do, if this makes sense, is to do the online app. It does include a $55 fee. Now, once that's in, I can help you turn to the other elements, which are as follows. So we do need 2 essays. The first is one asking about why you want to be a clinical psychologist, and why you want to be at Divine Mercy. The second will ask about your clinical and academic interests, what you might dissertate about, for example, once you become a student here. And then also, of course, your professional resume. Please make sure that's updated and then send it to us. Also, we'll need 3 recommendations, 2 of which should be from academics, from professors that know you and can speak to your academic abilities. If you're far out of school, it's okay. What you can do in lieu of that is get 3 recommendations, all from work supervisors. But if you're a recent graduate, say of college, or you just came out of a grad program, do try to procure those 2 academics, and maybe the third can be a professional one if you want to. Or if you're a senior in college, if you wanted to do 3 academic, that's totally fine. The point being is that we do need 3 recommendations, and however you divvy them up is up to you for the most part. And then, of course, the transcripts from your post-secondary institutions. If you've gone to grad school, we'll need graduate and undergraduate. And if you just undergrad, then just undergrad. Now, the GRE, we do require the GRE. But, so that's, you might say, for many, the bad news. But the good news is that the GRE is not, like you might say, the most important element of this. We're looking at multiple different aspects of each applicant, and the GRE is one among them. And it's frankly one of the, maybe you might say, less important. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying don't study for it, but I am saying to do keep the priority in mind. Okay, so it's better simply to take the test, excuse me, do your best you can, and then kind of, you might say, leave the rest to God, as it were, rather than sort of prolonging the process and never getting the application done because you didn't end up taking the GRE, for example. If you have more questions about the GRE, I'd be happy to speak to you about it. Just send me an email, schedule a time in my Calendly, and we can talk if that's at all causing you any anxiety. If you are an international student, please note this. So if you're on a degree outside of the US, you'll need to get it, your transcript evaluated through west.org. So that offers a course-by-course evaluation, so that the grading system can be distilled into American GPA. It does need to be the equivalent of an American bachelor's degree, and if it isn't in English, it will need to be translated into English. This, of course, the cost for all of these services is your own. And if English is not your first language, and this is something of an important point, if you don't use English in your ordinary life, in your professional and personal life, and you would consider English as sort of like a secondary language, you will need to take the TOEFL. Okay. If you're unsure as to whether you would consider English to be primary or secondary, again, talk to me. I can help you sort that out and determine whether you need to take the TOEFL. Okay. With that, I conclude. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Q&A box. Okay, Anthony Francis, can you suggest some books for a beginner in psychology? Dayspring, I think I'll let you take that one. Take a stab at that.
Let's see. I'm looking at my library here. That's a great question. I'm kind of drawing a blank in the moment. I just started this book, Becoming a Therapist, and it's very readable. It has really nice transcripts within the book so that you can kind of get a sense of what typical conversations are like. This is a book by Bender and Messner. I think it's 2000. This is maybe the older copy. I can give you a name. Nancy McWilliams is a published author. She's sort of the authority when it comes to psychoanalysis, psychodynamic theory, personality development. You might look into her. And then maybe some books by Paul Vitz. Bradley, I don't know if you could maybe recommend what he...
Yeah, as I may have like relayed to you, I'm a huge Paul Vitz fan, and I love like almost everything that he writes. I would probably, if you're really interested in like you might say the more theoretical elements, I would certainly recommend the first book he published, Psychology as Religion. There he kind of hits on a lot of things that Dayspring and I were talking about the distinction between the plight of humanistic psychology in the 20th century and how the tension that exists with, you know, a built-in sort of ancient Aristotelian Thomistic teleology that man has a finality beyond himself. That's a fantastic book to start with. If you want some, like, you know, this might be, I don't know if I would recommend this for beginners, but we do also have the meta model, a Catholic Christian meta model of the person. This is a major text for a lot of our doctoral students. If you're ambitious, it's definitely worthwhile. It's, as you can see, it's thick volume, but you know, if you just want to kind of like get your feet wet, maybe not start with that. But yeah, I would recommend anything that Vitz wrote to kind of get especially you might say like the conceptual, philosophical, theological apparatus and how it interfaces with the psychological. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, that's...
I would also, if you haven't read Viktor Frankl's, what's the title?
Oh, Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. It's often referenced in our classes. It's an excellent sort of segue into just thinking existentially as far as what is meaning and the kinds of questions that your patients are going to have. As well as we also started out with C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, which I think is an excellent capture as to where the culture is right now, which is prophetic because he wrote it in like the 1950s. But it's a wonderful way to kind of see sort of the crisis of meaning in so I come at it from a thoughtful approach. One book read if you're the Wounded Healer by Henry Nouwen, and you might jump on that because it's just such a wonderful picture of kind of what it means to be a healer, a compassionate healer, kind of what I was talking about earlier. So maybe that's just what I will offer.
Yeah, that's all fantastic titles. I haven't read the Noun. I'm familiar with Abolition, of course. I mean, that's like a favorite of mine. But the Wind Healer, that's really neat. Looks like that's all the questions that we have. So thank you all for being so attentive as an audience. I hope you've enjoyed this and profited from it, and are well, now appraised and informed of the doctoral program here at Divine Mercy. I very much look forward to speaking with you. Should you have any questions or would like to apply, I can certainly help with all of that. And thank you also very much to you, Dayspring, for joining me.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And good luck to all of you who are considering, and I hope you'll come join us.
Very good. All right. God bless everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.